Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Coles to Consciousness. My name is Shalise Ansola, your host for today, and we are back live with one of your favorite people. We were so excited to finally get in touch with her. It's been a while, but we put out her interview a couple days ago. It's already blowing up. Everyone was so excited to hear from her, and now we have her back to continue the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us, Jenna Miscavige.
Yay, so glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So obviously, people who are aware of the ex-cult space have heard of you. You are the niece of the current leader of Scientology. And before I go any further, to make sure I don't get anything wrong, I'm just going to have you brief people in case they haven't seen your first episode. They can watch this one and then go back and see the first one. Let everybody know the nutshell version of your story.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Scientology. My parents were part of Scientology's most dedicated group where, they sort of, it was like a military-esque group where they sign 1 billion year contracts. They work 100-hour weeks with no days off. They all live on church property. They eat together. And so my parents were basically joined this when I was almost 2 years old, and I grew up in that same order. I was basically like being groomed from when I was 2 to be a part of this same order, which I joined when I was 12. But before that, I went to a school for kids whose parents were part of this order, and it was just a lot of child labor, not very much education, and just a lot of Scientology brainwashing. And I moved around a bit, but I wound up leaving Scientology when I was 22, and I left with my husband at the time, who I married when I was 18, and we left together. And yes. Is that good?
Perfect. That was great. So, for those who aren't familiar with Scientology, there's this thing called fair gaming, and they basically feel like they have the right and the justification to go after people who have left to either try to bring them back or to just make their lives a living hell. And so, where we left off with you, Jenna, was we were talking about how they were trying to pull you back in. Obviously, they don't want the niece of the highest ranking member to be a quote defector, a suppressive person. And so they're constantly trying to pull you back in. And this was tricky because you were still in this area, what's the word I'm trying to use? You were in the vicinity of other Scientologists because you were originally living with your in-laws. And so there was really no way to escape it. You were just trying to get out of it, but it's like walking through mud. So where we left off is you had finally moved out of their house. You finally got a job that wasn't connected to Scientology and all of their corporations. So let's talk about the ways in which Scientology really had a hand in ending your what would be a very long marriage.
Right. Yes. Okay, good. So my marriage, we got married when I was just 18. And so I feel like the beginning of this is when you get married, when you're in this organization, which is called the Sea Org, you basically everyone there is kind of the same. You live in the same place. You're going to work in the Sea Org for the rest of your life. You have the same goals. You haven't really developed aspects of your personality because you've just been working for Scientology your entire life. And so you get married at 18. So in the Sea Org, you're not allowed to have sex before you're married. So many people get married when they're like 15, 16, 17, 18. And at that time, you just have everything in common. But when you leave Scientology together, you're living in the regular world. One of the first things you do is you question everything you believed that was told to you that was true. And you also start learning more about yourself. You start becoming who you would have been. And you start having time to do the things that you love. And so just to start off, you're at a sort of disadvantage where you don't really know each other. You don't even know yourself when you're first getting married.
Yeah.
And then
for
Scientology
sure.
kind of yeah, Scientology kind of, like, put us through hell, in the process of getting married and trying to leave, they really tried to separate us, like, he was gonna leave with me, and then they were trying to convince him to stay, so there was already this, like, tension and a bit of betrayal, and then when we finally did leave, we were living with his parents, and in Scientology, they have a rule where if you're an active Scientologist, you cannot be talking to somebody who's left Scientology. You either have to bring them back into Scientology or you have to disconnect from them. So this is how Scientology ruins families. And because we went and lived with his parents who were active Scientologists, they were sort of given the choice, not sort of, they were completely given the choice to either try as hard as they could to get Dallas, my ex-husband, back into Scientology, or else you're not gonna be able to talk to him again. So, as much as I sometimes like to hold this against them, the reality is that the only way they could see seeing their son and talking to their son was trying to get him back into Scientology, and Scientology presented to them me as the person who was getting in the way of this, which is completely true. I totally was.
You're like,
And
yeah.
so they so his parents kinda saw me as the enemy, the troublemaker,
Hmm.
and I was also by this point, like, so exhausted from fighting Scientology, like, I couldn't be nice about it anymore, and so so yeah, it was just like a whole thing, and it just put all this tension on the family where I was, like, sort of the black sheep, and they were trying to in order to get back in good with Scientology, basically, you have to pay a certain amount of money, and I was like, "Don't you dare pay a single cent of our hard-earned money to Scientology," and Dallas wanted to for a little bit, and, like, we had just been through so much. Finally, he got unbrainwashed, but there's just this sort of, like with his family, it never was quite right. Like, up until the day that I wrote and until the day my book was published, even his dad was saying, like, "Please don't write anything bad about Scientology itself." You know, when I was giving birth to our children, he was wanting me to have a Scientology birth, and if it had been up to me, I would have been like, "We gotta cut these people off. Like, I can't deal with this." But because and that's easy for me to say. By the way, tell me if I'm rambling on.
No, you're good. You just said something that I was like, hold on, a Scientology birth? What does that mean?
Yeah, so in Scientology, they don't believe that you should have any drugs when the baby's being born, and they also believe in this thing called silent birth, which is basically where nobody can talk or make any noises while the baby's being born, and it's because they believe that during moments of pain and unconsciousness, your mind is recording all of the words that are said and the smells and all these things, and these words can exercise an undue effect on you. Like, if someone's like, "Oh my god, she's gonna die," like, they believe that that could actually cause you to die. Or it could be like, "Oh my god, she's never gonna heal from this." It can cause you to not heal. So they believe in complete silence during birth. So I was already annoyed with his dad. Like, I already couldn't stand this man. I couldn't even believe he was, like, in the room. And then he kept being
Yeah.
like, "Please don't have the drugs." He was I think he knew better. Well, I wasn't really screaming or anything anyways, but he kept being like, "Don't have drugs, don't have this." And I was like, "Oh my god." Yeah.
Oh, that's enough to
So
make anybody go crazy. Like, get out of here. You have nothing to do with my vagina. Stay away. Like, you have no right to be this close to me while I'm pushing a baby out. Like, what are you doing here?
exactly, yeah. I mean, I was covered up just saying at that time, but still, it was like
But
a really, really
still.
hard birth. Totally. And
Yeah.
to be honest, like, even when we told him that we were having a baby, he was already like his face was like, she got him for good. He's like, it was almost like I can never get him to leave her now. They're gonna have a baby together, because he always was holding out. He didn't say those words, but he was pissed. So he was always like holding out hope that, he could get Dallas back into Scientology. And Dallas was willing to put up with a lot more than I was because he didn't grow up in the same way that I did. He was a Scientologist,
Mhm.
but not all Scientologists grow up how I did. He, for in his early years, he went to a regular school. He lived in a home with his parents. I didn't live in a home with my parents. So, and they had just, I hardly ever saw them. And so his concept of having loving family members was just like very different from mine. And where I would have like been like, all right, we can't deal with these people. Like they either are gonna stop harassing us to get back in Scientology, or we're not gonna talk to them. He was very much like, well, that's what Scientology does. And fair enough, that's true. And so I always held that guilt like over me that was like, okay, well, I can't be like Scientology and disconnect from
Mm.
family members. Um, and I mean, I was also very young, and now I'm like, okay, it's one thing to shut toxicity out of your life, and it's another thing for a church to force other people who don't want to be disconnected from each other. So there was just
Mhm.
so many factors that like built up this sort of like tension and this feeling of betrayal and this feeling of like like well, sorry, I'll just go back a little bit. I do think that when I got married at a young age, when you don't grow up in a family with your parents are gone. My parents were out of Scientology. I had been moved away from Clearwater where I had all my friends. I feel like there was this desperate thing inside of me to have one person, to have one little family connection. And
Mhm.
I think that also pushed me into marriage as well. And I think that, not feeling protected by that person and always feeling like he was enabling people who were trying to hurt me by not outright cutting them off felt like just
A
pain
further
over and over
betrayal.
again. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though he's a good person and he came to his way of thinking in his own way, it was still just like it was very unhealthy for me.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really hard scenario because you also made the decision pretty early on, I need to get out of here. And he was always a little on the fence, as you mentioned, because he didn't want to lose his family, which is understandable. But I'm sure
Right.
for you, it was like, oh my gosh, come on. We got out of the prison. We're out and you're trying to go back in and like we're so close. Just let it go. Just let it go. And this probably went on for years, right? Just trying to separate yourself.
Years, so many years. And yeah, it was like really exhausting. And it, I had just been enduring so much more than he had over the years. By the time he even joined the Sea Org, it was like I'd already been through 5 lifetimes, you know? So it was almost like, he hadn't endured everything I had been through. And so it's like, I don't know, what do you do at that point? And then there was this other layer
Mm-hmm.
that in Scientology and when we were leaving, I had fought so hard for us to stay together and for them not to separate us that,
Right.
when things weren't going well, I was like, yeah, divorce is not an option. Like they're not going to win. They're not going to
Mm,
separate us. And also like when you're in Scientology, they tell you like, when you leave, you're going to get sick, your life is going to be horrible, your relationships aren't going to go well. And I was like, we cannot give Scientology a single thing to use against us or to smear us, which
mm-hmm.
has taken me many years to realize that that's still letting them control you in that way. But at the time, it was the only thing, you know, that made sense to
Yeah.
me.
Well, how can
And,
you
you know,
not
them
be that way? I think everyone who has left a high control group, they, for a little while at least, some people are longer than others, they live out of spite because it's like, I will wear the tank tops. I will get my ears pierced. I will swear. Damn it. Just like, doesn't matter what it is and to what degree, all of us have that feeling of, when you're finally safe enough to fight, you kind of want to fight, even though you're not fighting anyone anymore. It's like you're fighting
Mhm,
this battle of the past. You're fighting to be the person that you always wanted to be, even if that's not who you want to be now. It's, well, I always wanted to
mhm,
do this thing, so I feel like I have to do it just to stick it to him. And that's not always the healthiest way to
exactly.
go, but it is something that I think a lot of us go through of unwinding all of that and figuring out who we are. And I know that a huge part of healthy relationships is understanding who you are as a person. The first thing you mentioned is, well, we were both Scientologists when we got married. We were both young. We didn't really know who we were outside of Scientology. And so when you take that away, what's left and how do we mesh together once that one common denominator is gone? And we see that in so many other high control groups as well. When one partner leaves and the other one is going, well, I don't even know who you are anymore. Do I want to know who you are anymore? It's just a really
Mhm.
scary place to be in. So before we keep going, though, I want to see if we have any more questions. Am I coming through pixelated still? Do I need to jump out and pop back in? Am I coming through clear for everybody?
For me, you do look
Yeah.
pixelated.
I do. So I don't know what's going on with the internet here today, but okay,
Mm,
well, you answer that question. I'm going to jump out of the
okay.
studio and come back in and see if it helps.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I
Okay.
loved hearing your story. Are you continuously wor Um, well, initially, you know, I in the first few years that we left Scientology, we would be followed by PIs, and it was it was upsetting, but I started speaking out about Scientology pretty early on, pretty soon after I left, and I did feel some protection in being so public about it. But also, I don't know if this is a side effect of Scientology. I think different people take it different they take away different things from it, but I am the least paranoid. Like, I think that somebody could have been following me every single day and I never would notice. I don't lock my door. I don't know where my house keys are. I mean, I lock it at night, but I'm very trusting. And so I'm not like so it has like there have been several situations where I've discovered that people are following me, but it's mostly because somebody else noticed and they told me, but I probably wouldn't even notice. So I'm not particularly scared, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't be. That's just how I am.
Yeah. The fact that you just said, yeah, sometimes people do follow me. My first gut instinct is like, what? That's not that's not something you should get used to, Jenna.
I know. I just feel like I think that I have to get used to it in order to not live in a constant state of anger about it. And
Mm,
I need to not be so angry in order to be smart, in order to take things step by step and deal with them in a way that's effective against
mhm.
Scientology. And so if I'm really angry about it, I th- I think that that actually makes that really hard for me.
Yeah. That makes sense. Letting go of the anger so that more productive emotions can come through. There's always a place for anger at some point, but letting go of it is a healthy step and a healthy progression toward healing. Any other questions? Am I still coming through blurry? Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
A little bit, but you were clear at first, but I I don't mind, but maybe it's
All
for everyone
right.
else
Well,
too.
just listen to my voice. Put the phone down, guys. Or just look at Jenna. Okay, so question for Jenna. How did your Scientology background affect how you bonded with and parented your children? Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a really good question. So, I would say that when I had my kids, I sort of went into this mode of I was trying to do everything I could to make sure that they didn't have the same childhood that I had. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, like, I don't know if prostrate is the right word, but I basically, like, tortured myself and like, that was another factor in my marriage. It was like I took on all of this guilt that for my parents because I think that in some way I felt like I was affected by some genetic thing in me that would cause me to
Mm.
not have a feeling of wanting to be near my kids or not or that where I could become a workaholic. That's actually what I was afraid of, where I could like become a
Mhm.
workaholic and then I would have these Scientology dreams where I was in Scientology and then my kids were in there and then I forgot about them. And so for some
Mm.
reason I was like trying to outrun this obsessively. And I was also and because of that, I became a stay-at-home mom, which I don't regret for 1 second, but also it, could be a little bit isolating, and also there was another part of it where I stopped talking about Scientology for a good number of years, and it was because I kept telling myself that if I ignore or I don't spend time with my kids because I'm talking about Scientology, what's the difference between that and my parents ignoring me while they're working for Scientology? This was what I had
Mm.
in my head. And so I would actually have to actively withhold myself from wanting to from doing something that I wanted to do. And another little part of it was I would have a hard time talking about Scientology without becoming angry and that and I don't like there's actually nothing wrong with that anger. Like I value my anger very much, but I think that that wasn't a good place for me to be in when I was with my kids all day every day, and so I kind of had to separate it out. I kind of had this separation that I did, which was both good and also bad because I didn't really need to punish myself for what my parents had done, and I like, now I'm like, "Okay, I wish I knew I had trust in myself. I had trust in my own goodness, and I didn't really have anything to prove, I just thought I did." And then I would have been able to have a little bit more of a healthy balance of caring for myself and what I care about and my kids.
Mhm. Well, that's so hard, and it just shows how good of a mother you are by overcompensating on just making sure you're overly cautious and giving them enough attention. And it's absolutely understandable that you would have those fears of not knowing what's innate and what's what your parents chose to do and how they chose to raise you or not raise you, especially not
Mhm.
having any sort of healthy model of what parents are supposed to do for their kids. I'm sure it was really hard for you at first to kind of navigate of what is a healthy amount of affection or what are healthy boundaries without being authoritarian and militaristic like how you were raised. And I'm sure there were
Mhm.
books involved in in learning from people that you trusted, but
Yeah.
just being a parent on your own in any normal or normative circumstance is already so scary and difficult. So you were probably navigating so much at once at the same time, trying to keep the Scientologists at bay. Leave us alone. I'm just trying to raise my family. Did you ever
Yeah.
have any fear for your children's safety because of the Scientologists who were coming after you?
I didn't have a fear for their safety, no, because I do think that Scientology by the time I'd had my kids, I actually moved across the country for a couple of years, but I mean, Scientology, I do th I don't think that they wanted to deal with the fallout of them coming near my children because it wouldn't have been
Mm.
nice. It would have put me on a track. Like, would not have tolerated that for 1 second. I would have exposed it to everybody. Like, I would have made it my full-time job. So, I wasn't worried about that. Problems sort of came up in other ways, like, because I was so concerned about my kids having a family like I didn't have, I was, like, so concerned at being accepted by or still hanging out with people in my ex-husband's family who weren't necessarily nice to me, and I would just take it, and I would always try to be the bigger person, and it wound up really eroding my self-worth, and it wound up really changing my entire personality. And it was actually a good side of myself to learn. I learned a lot of skills, I learned a lot of humility, and, I was getting many things from it as well. Like, just for example, a lot of me nurturing my kids and giving them what they needed actually was very, very healing to me. Like, I felt like
Mm,
every time I wrapped a blanket around them, it felt like I was wrapping a blanket around myself. But I think that I took a lot because I once again, this fear that my kids would look back and be like, "You weren't a good mom. You didn't let us hang out with these family members." I was afraid that my kids would look back and kind of have what the relationship that me and my mom had. And so I was
mhm,
just doing everything I could to avoid that. And there's been a few times in recent years where, like when I got divorced and I had to tell my kids, and I was so convinced that they would tell me that they hated me, that I was ruining their life. I was so convinced. And when they didn't do that, like when they were like, "Mama, we love you," and we just like they were just like worried for me, and they're obviously upset themselves, but I was like just it was like this unconditional love that I hadn't really experienced before. And so I was sort of
mm,
holding myself to this insane standard in some ways for them, and in some ways because I thought I had to in order to be loved and in order to be valuable and in order to be appreciated. Because also that's
yeah.
how it was for my husband. That's how he needed me to be in order to be the person that he wanted to be with. And so, yeah, sorry, I feel like I got a little bit on a tangent there, but I hope that makes sense.
No, it's great. I'd prefer you talk anyway because my video sucks, apparently. I don't know what's going on with the internet. So one thing though, I did want to ask you is within figuring out who you are and dropping Scientology and shedding this extra layer of yourself and becoming the mother that you are now, what were some of the
Mhm.
things that surprised you that you found out about yourself and you were like, oh wow, this is who I am and this is who I want to be?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. It's so funny that it also took so long because I feel like there was, even though it would seem like it after you leave Scientology, there's still family drama. You're busy with kids, you're busy with work, there's all this other stuff going on. But I do think that, the first things I evaluated for myself were like, do I really think I'm a spiritual being that lives lifetime after lifetime and picks up a new body? And I just okay, but that was more about whether or not I believed in Scientology. Just for myself, I kind of learned that I don't know that I'm actually really quite artistic, and that I do care, like, I do think that I'm a bit of an activist at heart, that I always was. Like, when I see things that are unjust, I I I feel passionately, not just any random thing, like an horribly annoying person, but like things that are real. Like when I see like, you know, good people really getting hurt, I feel like I have a lot of empathy, and so I do feel like, um, yeah, I do like to stand up for people or situations that I think are wrong, and I do think that I have, like, an innate sense of justice. Like, even if in Scientology they were all saying, "Well, no, this is right, it's okay that we do this," even if it even if I knew those were the correct beliefs, there's just, like, a feeling inside of me that was like, "That's not right," and I always sort of tried to warp Scientology policy in order to, I don't know, lead me in the direction of right, and so sometimes that was difficult, but yeah, that's one of the things I really learned about myself. Those 2 things are probably the biggest things that took me a while to learn.
Yeah. And did any of those things cause a strain in your marriage when you realized that you were this person who did want to stand up and advocate? Was that something that your ex was like, hold on, I didn't sign up to be with someone who was against Scientology? Because that's quite the stretch of when he met you.
Well, in fairness to him, like it took a few months, but then he was very much like, yeah, Scientology is a cult, and he would speak out with me about it
Mm,
together, but he was more like still would be in touch with his parents where I was like, yeah, I can't. This is too much to deal with. So he was very much like he was with me on being against Scientology. It was just the part
mm-hmm,
of yeah, I think that part of being who I am very much would have made me stand up to his parents or walk away. Like honestly, that was something that I was constantly withholding doing. Um, and I think that that put a lot of strain on our marriage because I also another thing about myself is that I believe in loyalty to people who I really love. Even if they
mm-hmm,
mess up, even if everyone messes up. Um, so I believe in that too, and I do think that those things were struggling with each other.
mm-hmm. So you were together, you told me right before this, 21 years, 22 years?
So I believe it was okay, wait, so maybe it was actually 20 years. We got married in
20
2002,
years.
and I believe we got divorced in two 2022 or 23. So it's 21 years, 21 years.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a long time. Do you feel like, based on what you were saying earlier, do you think you would have stuck it out that long if you weren't trying to prove Scientology that they were right? Not that they were right, but prove them that you could stay in this marriage no matter what they tried to do otherwise?
Um, I would say I would not have stuck it out that long if that wasn't what I was trying to do, but also I hadn't really had any other relationships. So I didn't know what was normal or not that it even matters what
Mm,
was normal, but I hadn't really yeah, I just hadn't really had any other relationships and so I just was so inexperienced and it wasn't like we hated each other. We are actually really good friends to this day. We have been through so much together and it wasn't all hell. I feel like we managed to work around the things we managed to build like a really good life for ourselves, a beautiful home. We traveled the world together. We did so many things. We even did artistic things like, he would build furniture and I would do pottery. Like we learned those things together. So we were best friends. But so there wasn't like hatred. It was just like we didn't really meet each other's needs in so many ways. And so there's some good aspects to not having the best marriage. Like I did sleep in the bed with my kids for like 10 years, but like I don't regret that because I feel like my relationship with my kids reflects that and it helped me. And so yeah, there's kind of upsides and downsides to everything. Like I did gain a lot of friendship from that and that sort of thing, but yeah, obviously it was sort of like missing out on a real like romantic relationship that whole time.
right. And that's something that I wanted to talk about. And then everyone drop your questions in the chat and we'll get to questions after this, which is how Scientology really truly sets you up for failure when it comes to relationships because of the extreme policies around dating and the punishments that can come if you step out of line or do something that they deem is wrong. And I even found it interesting that within Scientology, something that's not really having to do with a deity or heaven and hell, that there is still extreme purity culture in so many ways. And I
Mhm.
think in our previous interview, you mentioned how kids were just getting married as soon as possible, 16, 17 years old, because they
Mhm.
just wanted to have that love and not get in trouble for having sex or not get in trouble for even just flirting with each other. You got in trouble just for flirting with somebody. And so it really makes it
Right.
impossible for these kids to develop healthy relationships, even if it's just an opposite sex relationship that's platonic. I mean, how can you really learn how to develop those interactions in a positive way in such a strict environment? So, I want to hear from your perspective just some of the ways in which they really cut you off and don't allow you to figure out what you want romantically.
Right. Yes, totally. Yeah. So one of the it's taken me a long time to realize this, but a big aspect of it was that since I was just like a little girl, like even from when I was 6 to 12, it's like if you flirted with a boy, somebody would write a report on you. It's instantly demonized. And who knows what they considered flirting, smiling too much, but it was instantly like shame for having anything, any feelings, or even just like wanting attention or giving attention, anything like that. And so I learned from a very young age that if you do this, that you will be punished for it. And so when I was little, it was just being like having a report written on you. But as I got older, like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, like you would hear stories of like people would have like when people would get in trouble with certain justice actions, they would send around like a bulletin to the entire organization that you were in. And they would say things like they masturbated, they,
Oh,
and like, so yeah, so like, or there were just things like people would talk in back rooms saying like, oh, this person did this when they were having sex, this person did this. So it was almost like everyone would know anything you did. And also like when you were in an interrogation, anything you did sexually was a sin. So if you kissed a boy, so even when I was like, 15, if I kissed a boy, they will literally put you in a room, there's a video camera on you, and they'll be like, "Okay, you kissed him, or you guys kissed, like, what part of him was touching you, and what underwear were
jeez.
you wearing, and did you plan to wear those underwear, and what did you feel like
What?
inside when this is happening?" And the part of it that I've come to realize is that it isn't just that it's, like, shame and demonize, but forcing a child to give you that information when they don't want to and writing it down and sending it to other executives in the church and having them be punished for it is almost like it is child P. Writing it down,
Mhm.
writing those details and recording it, recording a child while saying it, that's child P. And it's
Yeah.
also like a violation. Like it's a violation. So for you, like sex or anything sexual becomes associated like I don't want to say that it's as bad as being raped, but it's like it feels like that. Like you have no choice.
A
You're
violation.
yeah, it's a total violation. And so anytime that I felt a certain way around someone, anytime that I felt sexual, I was like it felt like I was going to be violated for it. So I would like cut off that part of myself. Like I would be like,
Hmm.
stop feeling that way. And that has lingering effects for you. Like that isn't something that you just turn off. But it was like, I know that if I express this part of myself, if I'm like vulnerable in any way with anybody, then it will be used to destroy me. It will be
Hmm.
used and published to everyone. And when if I leave Scientology, they will publish that for everyone to see. And so, like you said earlier, like many people leave there given like high control group and some people will be like go out drinking and go wild and like they'll get to be themselves, but I was still holding myself back in that way in many other ways. Like I never did all of the things that I would wanna do because I was like, "No, they will use this against me." So maybe that's my version of being afraid, that's what I get instead of being afraid that people are following me. I'm like, I'm not afraid of people are following me because 'cause they're gonna find out that I'm boring, but I'm hurting myself in other ways. I'm suffering from this in other ways.
Yeah, it's
So
the
it's taken me a really
psychological
long time to
damage.
realize that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's the stuff that people don't really know is going on until they're able to address it and become aware of it. And I think it makes perfect sense for you where you're like, do whatever you want to me physically, not do whatever you want, but like you're not
Mhm.
afraid of them physically because you have been imprisoned. You were imprisoned your entire
Mhm.
childhood. You know what it feels like to have someone make your body go do physical labor or sit in a sauna for 5 hours or whatever it is. You're
Mhm.
like, yeah, I've endured that before, but it's the mental stuff that the self
Mhm.
policing that often gets so many people, and why I
Mhm.
always say Mormonism is a cult because it is such a psychologically binding cult where you don't even realize you're bound in chains in your brain because that's how they wired it to be. And so having those fears, because that's one thing that it's hard to control, right? Of your thoughts, or how do I get this out of my head? It's not as simple as breaking physical chains. It's something that you really have to work on, you have to become aware of, you have to figure out the solution to move forward and break out of that mental prison that, again, some people don't even realize they're in.
Exactly. It's almost like you have to be in a therapy session or be talking to somebody who grew up normally, and they have to recognize something that you said that's like, "Huh? Wait, what's that?" Because how would I know if it's different than what's going on with other people?
Mm-hmm.
I only have one mind here. I only know what's happening
Yeah.
in mine. So it's almost like you have to, like, accidentally drop clues that someone picks up on that you can then to even know necessarily what you have to address. Or, of course, you can read books
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, but yeah, so it's such a crazy process, and what you're saying is so right. It's like a PI following me is nothing compared to being in Scientology and being interrogated daily. So that
Mm-hmm.
is it, but it's also like a distorted sense of reality. Like that's something I should be very angry and disturbed by, but it's so much better than how it was before that it's like, well, I'll definitely take this free life with being followed by a weirdo over being in
Mm-hmm.
Scientology. It's still so much better.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to get to relationships after your marriage and how you've been able to navigate those because I'm interested to see after jumping out of a marriage because you got in so young and you said it was the first one you knew, what was the process of trying to navigate after that? But first, let's see if we have some questions from our audience here.
Okay.
Can you talk about the purity culture, how it affected you after leaving? Yeah, so maybe zoom in on any of the effects that you feel like have lingered or something that you've worked through and been able to conquer since leaving.
I mean, I think that's pretty much what we just spoke about. Um, so it's just like, but I think that more recently I have dealt with, I mean, maybe this is moving forward into new relationships, but I think that having shame associated with like love and wanting a
Yeah.
relationship like that, like in Scientology, it felt like that was so selfish, like, you would be shamed for that, like, they'd be like,
Hmm.
"What you care about is sex and family, and you should be concentrating on the group." And so, just being in a relationship and having love and wanting that for yourself. I feel like when I came out of my marriage, I was like, yeah, I don't need to have a relationship for myself. Like, I was like, I just need to get through life. And I think that letting go of some of the shame of you're not worthy, you obviously aren't good enough to receive love. Otherwise, why would your parents have left? Things like that that are like that make you think that you're not worthy of having love or you're not worthy of being happy. I think um
Hmm.
those are some of the things that I've had to shed moving forward that are left over from that purity culture.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we've talked about ways in which Mormonism and Scientology are so similar, surprisingly so, but I don't think I've ever
Mhm.
related to you more than in this moment about purity culture and worthiness and shame. And I didn't realize that Scientology went even 10 steps further than a basic bishop's interview, well, depending on the bishop that you have, but asking those
Mhm.
explicit details. It's so violating. And we were talking right before this about my story because I went on Aaron's channel and
Mhm.
we were talking about the whole thing that got me to question. But it was truly that moment of feeling so horrendous about myself, about feeling so unworthy and so deflated. And I feel like that's their whole point, is to make you feel such like an awful person to where you'll just do whatever they say. You'll just give in, you'll cave, your will is broken. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. And that was a turning point for me where I finally stood up and said, no, I'm not going to give in to that. I am a good person. I am. And it takes a lot of fight to be able to do that. And I'm sure over the years, you've been building up that fight in yourself of, no, I am worthy of love. I am worthy of having a romantic relationship and being okay with it. And not only feeling okay with it, but leaning into it and feeling excited about it, because it's such a normal part of our lives to have that romanticism. And if that's something that you want, it's like, of course you deserve it. So I'm sure
Mhm.
that you've been building that over time, but I just wanted to say it's so interesting how I think I even saw it in the chat. Someone was like, "Holy crap, Bishop's interview is like the same thing," and I didn't know how horrible it actually went past what I had to deal with within Scientology. It's wild.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I was thinking that when I was listening to your interview today too. I was like, wow, holy crap, there are so many parallels. And it's weird how
Yeah,
they're all so
so
pervy
go
around
ahead.
sex. Like, why do they care so much? How can you, if it's part of it, then it's because they're pervs. Like, there's no real good reason for that.
Exactly. It's like, guys, what are we doing here? I feel like Mormonism is a sex cult in disguise because it's all they care about. It's all they talk about. Even if it's don't do it, that's all we're talking about is sex. Like, what's going on?
It's so
Okay, let's see if
true.
we have any more questions.
Okay.
Okay, how long has it taken for you to trust others? Do you find other ex-Scientologists more deserving of your trust? Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I feel like it's different. Like I have a friend who's like, she doesn't really trust anyone. She's really like, are they in the circle of trust? I trust everyone. I really do. And then usually I find out later that maybe I shouldn't have, but I trust everyone. And I don't know if that's just by nature of I always lived in a dorm with 7 other people, connected by a bathroom to 7 other people. I was never alone my whole life. When I was in Clearwater, Florida, which is Scientology sort of training mecca, people would come from all over the world, old, young. I was always with them all day. I always sat at a table with like 12 people. So I trust kind of everyone to a point where maybe it's like problematic.
Do you think that's something that you learned within Scientology as far as an exercise of blind obedience, blind trust, or do you feel like innately you just want to see the best in people?
That's a good question. I actually think it's a little bit of both. I think that it is probably just part of my personality, and I think a large part of it is me being too lazy to go through the to do put in the effort to test someone enough to see if I should trust them. And but I also do think that so many red flags have been normalized for me that like I put up with a lot before I'm like, "Yeah, that's weird." And so, like, in the past, when I would be with other people, they'd say, "Oh, this is weird about that person. This is weird about that person." And I'd be like, "You're kinda judgmental," which, I mean, I'm judgmental too, but, like, I wouldn't I would see it as like, "Oh, they're not being really nice to start out with," and then usually later on, after being best friends with that person for, like, a couple months, it would wind up being like, "Oh, okay. This person is putting me down. This person won't take no for an answer," and, um, yeah, so I kind of learned the hard way every time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do one more question and then I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you think it's possible to unite different anti-Scientologist activists for a united voice against the organization? Tricky one.
Um I'm assuming that they're sort of referring to how sometimes different ex-Scientologists, there will be like clashing, differences of opinion, outright hate. And That's hard. I mean, I feel like in Scientology, we were always taught to, we wouldn't report bad things to the police because it would threaten the cause. We wouldn't do this or that because it would threaten the cause. And so I think sometimes, and I don't mean in this situation, but I think that sometimes when people sort of suggest that, it like triggers this thing in ex Scientologists that it's like, well, no, I'm not going to just be quiet about that because of the cause. But that being said, it's like I do wish that we could all be united. And going into it, I feel like that's what we all want. That's what we all start off with. I do think there is an interesting thing where it's like we can be united for the most part, but it's like, what if people who were leaders in Scientology sort of come out and then they're like, they're speaking out about Scientology, but they're not really speaking out about the day-to-day things that happened. They're speaking about maybe what happened to them, and it's sort of like, I don't know, like, what if all the leaders came out of a different cult and it was like all of a sudden they're the heroes, but you knew these people your whole life and they were sort of the perpetrators, and it can seem like they're benefiting from being like, "Oh, you're a hero now that you left." And so I don't have my head entirely wrapped around it. Like, I'm still figuring it out. I do believe that there's a difference between just people who grew up in Scientology and people who were leaders who were just sort of, had a ton of kids working for them every day. And I do genuinely believe that those people didn't know that it was wrong at the time because they were kids in that position as well. But at the same time, I don't want to give current people who are in Scientology an excuse to be committing illegal acts by just sort of being like, well, we forgive everyone because they don't know. I think that when you've had like 20 years to look back on these things, even if you didn't know at the time, there's been plenty of time for you to look back on what is right and wrong and,
Hmm.
maybe rethink it, especially if you've had your own kids since then.
Yeah, I actually just had this conversation with Jamie Mustard. I don't know if you're familiar. He
Mm,
was in the generations, like in the early 70s, and he was one of the first children there where they lived in
mm,
animalistic conditions. What he was describing was
mm,
just horrendous. And he posed
mm,
the same question, which was basically like, at what point do you tell these perpetrators you need to take accountability versus you were in a cult and you were brainwashed yourself? And I think it's a really nuanced discussion, and it's so tricky
mhm,
because I think it's a yes and I think it's you can be a victim and you can be a perpetrator. And if you were a perpetrator after you leave, you have a responsibility to take accountability for as much as you can, while also
mhm,
understanding that you were under a certain amount of stress or pressure or survival. And I think it's it's hard and it's not black and white. So I understand where you're coming from, and I know that a lot of people in the ex-Scientology space have varying ranks of when they came out and what they may or may not have done and how they grew up in it or didn't grow up in it. And so
mhm,
it really is hard, and ideally everyone would just be like, yes, we're all on the same page, and yes, I can take
mhm.
accountability. But I think it is hard for people to be able to look at what they've done in the mirror, especially if they're not ready to deconstruct that part of their life yet, because it is hard to recognize you've caused harm.
Of course, yeah, I agree, and I think that this might be wrong, but I do think that most perpetrators were victims at one point. They say like, bullies usually have something going on at home. So I think that that is the case. It's just because hurting other people is destructive. It's like we can't sort of let that be an excuse. And I
Excuse
do
it.
think, yeah, and I think like in my personal opinion, I would be very forgiving of people who apologized and sort of were honest about the things. Not like, I'm not even saying that people have hidden secrets, although in some cases I think that they do. I think just about like if they're like, yeah, I was the boss in charge and I had 30 kids in front of me every day and they were doing the laundry, they were separated from their parents. Just like, I think that just acknowledging it and not having like this continued gaslighting because otherwise it comes across as continued gaslighting, which is continued harm. But if
Right.
those people did talk about that, they would be my heroes. I'm not like sitting here trying to like go after them or anything like that. It's just like a little acknowledgement, and a little acknowledgement goes a long way, but also talking to the people. Like if there's many people who are still in Scientology that they can't talk to, but if you're both out, like have a conversation with them, acknowledge how they felt, acknowledge, some of your wrongdoing. I'm not out to get anyone. I want us all to be on the same side.
Yeah, definitely. So, wrapping this up, when it comes to relationships after your marriage, what do you think is the number one thing that you have learned since figuring out who you are? I'm sure it's still a journey, it's always a journey, but what is one thing that you've learned to stand up for, or one thing that you've learned that you won't accept less with, or something that I definitely want this in my partner?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. I mean, it's really important to me to feel protected by my partner, like to feel like my partner will stand up for me. And many times when you're somebody who stands up for yourself or other people, people tend to think that you're okay, you've got this. People would say that about me, but it's kind of hard when you're sort of being singled out all the time and you're maybe I know there's many other Scientologists who are speaking out, but when I was in Scientology, it's very hard to be that sole person. So I feel like somebody who will also really stand up for me and protect me is a huge deal for me. But I feel like one of the biggest things that I've realized, and it was actually a lot of it when I was talking to Tim Fletcher, who's this guy who's just wonderful. He talks about childhood trauma, but it's like I didn't realize that I couldn't accept love because I didn't
Hmm.
think I was good enough. And I
Yeah.
still do things like if somebody does something that is great and wonderful, it's like I even stop myself from feeling it to if I get too excited. Like it's like I'm doing like I stop myself from feeling that love, or I question it, or I'll turn it into a test. And I think that I work on that like sort of core wound a little bit all the time. And I keep thinking that I can just resolve it and then it's done. And then no, it sort of comes back. So I think you deal with it in layers, little by little, and your your relationship with it gets better and better, and your actual relationship gets better and better from it. But I do think that our relationships do challenge us. They do show us the things that we need to work on, both you and your partner. And I personally don't believe that like that relationships are supposed to be easy peasy. Now, like I'm not saying they have to be horrible, but like you're kind of growing together, and you it's almost like you have no choice but to sort out your core wounds in a relationship because you spend so much time with that person, and that's your person who you love so much. And so it's actually kind of exciting and interesting to do that now that I have the first clue what's happening. Before I was just like completely blind and had no idea.
Yeah, it's tricky, and especially if you can find that someone who holds that space for you and understands that maybe you reacted from a wounded place instead of just getting upset. Like, why did you react that way? As someone who could say, okay, I see you're having a moment. Let me know if you want to talk about it or when you're ready to talk about it, helping each other grow into the people that you want to be. And that's also the sign of a healthy relationship, right? Where both partners can hold space for each other and make allowances in a way that's healthy and not destructive or toxic. All of that is just, I mean, everyone can learn that, cult or not, right? We all need to learn how to work better together and be more compassionate to each other. And I've just been cracking up. You would think Scientology themselves are outside of my window with a leaf blower because I'm like, what is the deal with today? My video is going off. The gardener came a day early. I'm just trying to mute myself incessantly, like, I'm sorry. What is
I can't hear it at all, so
happening?
don't worry.
Oh, good, because I keep muting. They were literally just at the window, and I'm just like, hold it together, Shalise. This is ridiculous. This
Oh,
has
that
been
is so
such a great
funny.
conversation, though. Let's see if we have any final questions before we wrap up.
Okay, perfect.
I love Jenna. So happy you two are having these collabs. Yes, we need to do them more often.
Thank
I feel
you.
like there are so many topics we could just discuss
Yeah,
and
I
go
would love
on
that.
for days
I
about.
need to Yeah, I need to do more on my channel, but yeah. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it for sure. Debbie says, much love
Amazing.
to Jenna. I want to virtually hug her for her strength. A true superhero. Yes, I
Oh, thank
agree.
you.
I agree. Kudos to you, Jenna, for having survived Scientology so well, becoming an articulate, lovely young woman to share your story of overcoming. Yes. Thank you guys so much for coming live. It always
Thank you.
means so much to us when you drop your questions in the chat and you interact with each other. I love seeing when other people are like, hey, my favorite people in the chat, because it feels so much like a community, not a cult, but a loving, supportive community where we can come together and rally around each other. It's just awesome what you guys do, especially if you're watching the replay. Leaving those comments further helps boost the algorithm so more people can see the video. Hitting the like, a free way to support the podcast, the best way, interacting with this post in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, subscribing is a great way too. And if you have not already, make sure to check out Jenna's channel. It's awesome. All the links are in the description, so it's just a click away. You can go see all of her content and what she's been up to. So happy to have Jenna on for live. Jenna's a badass. Yes, I agree. So, do you
Oh.
have any final thoughts, Jenna, or anything you wanted to button this with that we didn't get to?
I mean, I feel like all we can do is sort of like learn from each other. We have our shared humanity. And for many years, I didn't listen to stories of ex-cult members because I would be afraid that I would just become so depressed. But recently I've been doing it, and there's just so much wisdom that we share with each other. And just like the community you're talking about, so much kindness, and in so many ways, like you get this love and like acknowledgement that you never got. So I too am so grateful for your community, for my community, and for the overlap we have, because it's just a much bigger community. And yeah, that's really wonderful. So thank you guys for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for what you're doing too, I think it's so great to have so many different voices. Even voices from the same communities often offer different perspectives that resonate with others that wouldn't resonate with somebody else. So everybody's voice is important, and I'm so happy we finally got to have you on. So guys, thank you
Yay.
so much for joining us again. Make sure to go subscribe to Jenna's channel. Check out ours if you are new here. We have so many different videos. We just did an interview with Jenna, full hour and a half. So definitely go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Link is in the description. And we have a whole Scientology playlist too. We have really gone into the depths. We have another one coming out in a couple days. I think in 2 days from now, we're going to be giving Jamie Mustard's story, growing up again, another child in Scientology. And any other announcements? Any other final thoughts for you, Jenna?
Nope, that's it.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well. Hit the like button too.
Bye. Thank you.